How's it going, Exile? So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about my plans for the league start. So as you might have noticed, GGG already did some significant nerfs to the infusion mechanic, especially during the early campaign. But honestly, I don't think it's going to be too bad. Yes, it's not going to be nice. We're not going to fly through the campaign like crazy with like 100 cold infusions, just blasting everything with sparks. Unfortunately not, but there's still decent ways to get you through the campaign if you're playing a Stormweaver. But one thing first about the league start. So since I'm in Europe, the league start for me is going to be at 10 p.m. at night. And you know, sometimes they're going to be delayed because of technical issues or whatever. So I will be not live on league start when that happens. I will start fresh on the next day because my goal is to bring you like early game guides as soon as possible. And I really want to exhaust myself with, starting playing in the middle of the night and then basically just burning myself out because we have all weekend and I also have vacation after that. So I have a lot of time to bring all the relevant stuff to you. I'm just going to delay my initial launch, by a couple of hours. It's also going to be vastly beneficial because, I will have access to trade on the next day. Because, if I start blasting right away, I will not have access to trade, or I have less access to trade. But just by delaying my start for a couple of hours, there will also be a lot of people already trading away their stuff. And especially during the early campaign, I'm going to assume that support gems are going to be much more sought after because you can use multiple support gems. So especially for the infusion story, I pretty much want to use Overabundance in a lot of skills. And a lot of skills need 2 support gems to be viable during the early campaign. So my plan is basically to just spend my first exalts and just buying the extra support gems so I can go through the campaign a little bit faster and a little bit smoother. Anyway, so in this video, I really want to focus on the early game options on how to still use the infusion mechanic and how to still go through the campaign with a Stormweaver without any issues. So don't expect any late game stuff in here. I don't speculate on late game. Just gonna give you some hints and some ideas how to get through the early game easier. So let's get started. So a really good support gem we can still use during the campaign is Overabundance, because this will help us to get higher limit on the spells, and it's just a tier 1 support gem. So for example, for Orb of Storms, if we want to generate lightning infusions and we have a limit of 1 orb, it's very simple to just use Overabundance to give us an additional orb here. So that is a very straightforward way, and I assume these orbs are going to do, at least a little bit of damage, but most of important is they're going to generate the lightning infusions for us. So a pretty easy way to do this with Orb of Storms. So for Frost Bom, it gets a little bit more tricky because Frost Bom now has a limit and it also has a cooldown. So we basically need to break 2 negative conditions to be able to generate more than 1 Frost Bom and more than 1 infusion. So obviously we can still use the Overabundance to get +1 to limit. That's pretty easy. We cannot socket it in here in the legacy client because the Frost Bom doesn't have the limit yet. But it will be able to use Overabundance once the patch launches. But then now we also need to bypass the problem that it has a cooldown. So the only reliable way I see right now to do this is Spell Cascade, because if we socket Spell Cascade, it's just going to create 2 of them. So basically, this is going to create 3. The third one is just not going to be created if we press 1 to limit, so it's just going to create 2, and then it's going to generate 2 infusions for us. But we need 2 support gems, so I don't know how early we're going to do this in the campaign, but I still think cold infusions together with Spark are going to be the most strong thing we can do here. So especially later on with, Snap and, freezing with Frost Nova, I still think this is going to be the way to go here during the campaign if you don't want to go for like Essence Drain or other stuff. So we already talked about it will be pretty easy to generate lightning infusion with Orb of Storms and just Overabundance. So how do we best use these lightning infusions? Because we can basically only use them with Arc or Flame Wall at this point. So Flame Wall will be a great choice early game because, it is relatively easy to do, and if it has a lightning infusion, it will basically add double damage to a spark. And if you, happen to also have like a frost infusion, you can add basically triple damage to a spark. By triple damage, I don't mean it's going to deal 3 times as much as damage. We don't know how much damage it will deal. I'm just going to say it's going to add 3 different damage effects on top of the spark, which will make it very strong. Also, it seems like if you cold infuse a spark, as you can see right now, it's going to launch more projectiles. So this is a very, very nice synergy. So how can we make use of Flame Wall? It's pretty easy because we can just use, if we want, 1 or 2 support gems. If we have 2 support gems already, we can use obviously Fortress, so we can stand in the middle and all projectiles pass through it. We don't have to do this, but I would recommend this. And then, if we have a spare support gem, we can also put Persistence, because it's just going to make the Flame Wall last longer. Because in this case, we don't want to recast our Flame Walls. We want to have one Flame Wall lasting longer, for example, in a boss fight, because it's going to have the Lightning Infusion on it, and we don't have sufficient way to generate a lot of infusions. So we can just prolong the duration of the Flame Wall, so we have more bonus of the Lightning Infusion, so we can use more sparks. So I feel like this is going to be also a very great way to use infusions early on. So then, as soon as we reach level 14, we're basically gonna unlock tier 5 spells. So it gives us access to Frostbolt, Cold Snap, and we also have Frost Nova. So at this point, we can probably try to go for Full Frost or Full Frost augmented with Spark, which is most likely going to be my plan. Maybe even going to be augmenting it with Flame Wall, but that's most likely just going to be in boss fights. So what's going to be the playstyle? Well, basically, we can decide to use either Frostbolt or Frost Nova or Ice Nova to freeze stuff, because Ice Nova is very nice at freezing stuff, and it can also consume cold infusions to even do more freeze. So a very nice way to do this with the Ice Nova is the Unleash support, so it's basically just going to cast 2 times. We don't really care so much about the damage, we more care about the freeze. So if we do a Frost Nova, as you can see, we just get 2 of them, and with Magnified Effect, it has like a nice range. So we could just freeze packs of mobs with this and then cold snap them, pick up the infusions, and then we would, for example, have cold infused Spark to finish up the rest. We can obviously also do this with Frostbolt. Frostbolt is going to do a little bit more damage against Ice Nova, and we can use it with Scattershot. So, I cannot tell how viable this is going to be, because Snap has a cooldown, so we cannot snap all of these. But, it might be still a nice augmentation here. And keep in mind, we still have the Frost Bomb to do the exposure, and I think we're going to have a nice amount of cold infusions, when we hit like level 14, 15, 16-ish during the campaign. And then we can use our cold infusions with Spark to basically throw a lot of freezing projectiles, and it looked really, really nice with the Spark. So this is probably going to be my league start planning here. So really, I'm gonna start with like Orb of Storms and, try to make my way with Orb of Storms and Spark and, maybe Flame Wall to just, go towards like level 15, 16, 17, whatever. And then I will, at least attempt to move into like somewhat Full Frost with an augment of Spark. So I'm just going to use the Spark to use the cold infusions as best as I can. Lightning infusions, we will get them probably, but, I will probably not even use them. Maybe I will still use Orb of Storms in the mix and use Flame Wall for bosses. So I think, you can just place 2 Orb of Storms, then a Flame Wall with like increased duration on a boss, and then, still do like the cold and Spark stuff. Also, like, Snap is going to do decent damage against bosses. So I feel like, it's not going to be that terrible. Obviously, with the nerfs to Snap and Frost Bomb, it's not even going to be remotely as strong as I anticipated it to be. But I still think, we're going to make it through the campaign just fine. And also, like, all these changes don't really seem to affect the late game all that much. So lastly, I just want to, do some speculations what I'm going to do in the late part of the campaigns. Again, this video is just going to be about the campaigns. I'm not going to talk what happens after. I think nobody can tell at this point. But in the late part of the campaigns, I think we have a good way either doing with Arc. Again, we don't know how good it's going to be, so maybe it's just dog shit, maybe it's nice. But, we also will have Firestorm at some point in the campaign, and we'll have Comet at some point in the campaign. So, this probably might be a nice way to use your infusions to have some extra burst on like stronger mobs. So I assume we're still gonna do like the whole Frost thing and just augmented it with, a casual Firestorm here and there or a casual Comet here and there. And this is most likely going to be enough to get us through the campaign just fine. And then, we can start rocking endgame and we can see, what it's going to be. Is it going to be Eye of Winter? Is it going to be Spark? Is it going to be Arc? Is it going to be Firestorm? Is it going to be cast on Ignite? Is it going to be cast on Ailment? Is it going to be cast on Crit? Whatever it's going to be. To be honest, I don't like to speculate on that. I'm pretty sure, Stormweaver's going to be in a decent place. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be S tier unless, there's some stuff which is completely broken we don't know yet. Which I think, you know, Firestorm might have a slight potential to be completely broken, but I don't think so because of the limit part. But Eye of Winter, I don't think it's going to be broken, but it could be nice. So I think it's not going to be like an S tier. I don't think Stormweaver is going to land in S tier. I'm more thinking about probably a solid A tier. There's definitely going to be better classes like Blood Mage and stuff like that. But I really like the focus on the elemental infusions. I like, you know, my screen being like on fire with like, you know, different stuff. That's just like the fantasy of a sorcerer, whereas, you know, elementals is just my thing. You know, I know a lot of people like the dark stuff with the occult stuff and like all the shadow and stuff like that and poison, but I'm more like the elemental guy, so I'm really looking forward to this. And, you know, I hope I can craft some nice builds. So I will try, and, you know, I will keep you guys posted. And I see you guys next time.